people have written Royer in the past, hoping to get some answers from Rick Perrotta or Dave Royer, questions that they have about ribbon mics. And today, Rick Perrotta, the president of the company, is here. He's a co-engineer with David Royer. Pretty much everything Dave does is done with Rick too. And Rick's going to answer some questions we have. We're answering these questions live too. So if you want to send them in on the chat, we will answer whatever you'd like to know. But
Sure.
I'll just tell you quickly, Rick in the 80s had a major LA studio where they were recording, like, George Harrison and Chili Peppers.
Kiss, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Berlin, a lot of the 80s bands, a lot of stuff, a lot of movies and jingles too.
Wow. Sometime we should do this, but just talk about the studio days, because I don't even know a lot of those stories.
Horror stories.
And then after the studio, Rick and Mark Sansom started a little boutique amplifier company called Matchless Guitar Amplifiers. Rick literally sat on his living room floor and had a really nice Vox transformer, and unwound the entire thing and documented it perfectly so that he could recreate that magical transformer. And that's a big part of what made Matchless tick.
That was very important, that transformer. Actually, Mark, just a side note, Mark had about 4 or 5 really cherished Vox AC30s. Oh, wow. And we picked the best one, and we said, it's going to be sacrificial. And that's the one that we took apart.
Wow.
So probably one of the best Vox AC30s got sacrificed for Matchless.
That's hard, but it gave its life for the cause.
It did indeed, yes.
And then you were the president of Matchless and the production chief for what, like 6, 7, 8 years?
6 or 7 years. And then also when we merged with US Music, I was managing Randall guitar amplifiers, Vinci strings, and they also owned Guild at that time. Now I think Fender owns Guild.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got lucky.
Long time ago.
Yeah, it was a while back, and I had a little company with Dave Royer called DVA that was in the process of going kaput. But Dave was starting to think about ribbon mics, and we met Rick. And Rick, this was his post-Matchless. Right. What, you've been out of Matchless for maybe a year or so?
Yeah, I just sold Matchless, and I was looking for something else to do before I became destitute. And was doing some consulting work for Billboard Live, and met somebody there, and I was telling them that I'd like to get another company started. And Mark Process, who's a mutual friend of ours, said, you should meet John Jennings and Dave Royer, and the rest is history.
There it goes. There it is.
Yeah.
So that, and Rick at that time had bought a home with a really large garage, like a good sized garage, but then in the back, a big structure.
Workshop. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Workshop. And thinking that he maybe would start his next company there. And that was where Royer started. And we were there for what, 5 years?
No, 6 years. We were there for 6 years. Yes.
Wow. And I remember people like Jerry Hay and Ross Hogarth, and just in our very early days, people showing up in that garage, picking up mics left and right. It was pretty exciting days.
It was. I enjoyed those days a lot.
Yeah, I did too.
But we outgrew the submarine, and that's why we moved over to where we are now on Empire.
Yeah, we're about a mile from the airport, and they've been here for a long time. It's been good.
We've been here in this building for 15 years in May. Yeah.
Doesn't seem that long.
Long time.
Yeah. So what we're doing today is we're answering some questions, and Rick is really the best guy to be asked to get some answers from. I've got a few questions that we've seen come through a lot of times, and so we'll get started with that. And then if y'all have any questions, just feel free to hit us up. So Rick, you're on the spot.
I'm on the spot. Okay.
I'm just going to start. I'm going to kind of randomly pick some of these.
Okay.
I have an older R122 and I want to get another one for stereo. Is the R122 Mark II, that's the more recent model of the R122, is it compatible with the older 122?
Well, when we designed the 122 Mark II, we had compatibility in mind. The 122 Mark II has a 100 hertz high pass filter, and it also has a 15 dB pad. But when those switches are in the out position, off position, the two circuits are perfectly compatible. A 122 and a 122 Mark II will sound exactly the same in that mode. So you could use them for a matched pair. And we had that in mind when we designed the Mark II. So yes, they're perfectly compatible.
Nice. I know this sounds maybe gratuitous, but I know it's not easy sometimes to introduce switches and then keep the very same sort of overall sound of a microphone with the switches disengaged.
Right.
And I know you guys put a lot of work into that.
We did. Actually, the way we did it, when the switches are out of the circuit, they're completely disconnected, and the original circuit is completely intact.
Nice.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been on the other side of that quite often, and I know that that works. I blended the two mics, and it's nice. Okay. Here's another one. The specs on my R121 indicate a 300 ohm output impedance and at 1 kilohertz, and my preamplifier has an impedance of 1500 ohms. Can you explain what this means?
Right. Ribbon microphones and dynamic microphones are very sensitive to the preamplifier that they're fed into. If the input impedance of the preamplifier is too low, it'll have the tendency to restrict the movement of the diaphragm or the ribbon. So we have a rule of thumb that states that any preamplifier should have an input impedance at least 5 times greater than the output impedance of the microphone, which means it will impart the least amount of dampening on the element. So and most preamplifiers nowadays have fairly high input impedances. The vintage recreations of tube mic pre's or mic pre's from the 50s and 60s have fairly low impedances. So if you have a preamplifier with a switchable impedance, set it to the highest impedance that's available to you. But rule of thumb is whatever the output impedance is of a given microphone, it wants to look into a mic pre with a input impedance at least 5 times greater.
Cool. Does it mess it up if it goes higher? Like if you're in, nope.
No, you can go higher, but you definitely don't want to go lower. And the effect on a preamp that's got a very low input impedance is that the first thing you'll notice is a little loss of level, but mostly it'll damp the low frequencies.
I've got a story for you. Years ago, there was a Matchbox 20 session, and they bought a pair of 121s for the room. And I got a call from the engineer, and he was just freaking out. He goes, "These are just not working out. They sound terrible. What's the matter?" And I said, "What have you got them plugged into?" "They're in the Neve console." Well, the older Neves had pretty low, and you could set the input impedance, and you could set it very low.
Yeah.
So I said, get them out of the Neve and get them into any other modern pre around there. And I think they had some, I don't remember what they used, but they plugged it into something else while I was on the phone. And he goes, "Oh, there you go. That's the way it sounded when I heard it before." So but it freaked them out at first because they sounded so different. One of the great things about audio is sometimes screwing things up that was fun.
Yeah, a lot of interesting sounds have come out of happy accidents.
Yeah, like Michael Wagner likes to close mic his guitar cabinets. He likes to get really close, but instead of taking the bass out with EQ, like using a high pass, he'll set the impedance really low and it kills all the bass and even some of the highs, but he gets a really great mid-range, and wow, what a sound. So sometimes screwing it up.
Technique,
exactly.
Technique.
But yeah, like you said, the ribbon is happiest, I guess, at 1500 ohms and up. So cool.
Next question.
Why do I see so many pictures that have Royer mics angled?
Okay, there are a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, when people are close miking with a ribbon microphone, we try to minimize the plosive hitting the ribbon directly. So by angling the microphone a little bit, you will prevent the ribbon from getting a shock. So that's the main reason. The other reason is that if you angle the microphone with the rear lobe facing upward, I'll give you an example. Take a little 121. Let's say you have a guitar amp and the speaker's here and the ribbon mic is faced at an angle with the rear lobe facing up. The rear lobe is going to pick up some of the room ambience, which usually enhances the sound of the guitar amp. You could also angle the microphone the other way, but then you're going to pick up reflections off the floor, and those are usually not very desirable. So that's the reason. First is to minimize plosives from hitting the microphone directly. And the second one is to pick up some ambience from the ceiling or the upper part of the room.
Cool. And to sort of get that plosives conversation into something that people sort of relate to, like here's a 121, right? So you smack that thing hard, the whole ribbon kind of goes like this. But if it's angled, instead of going like this, it more ripples, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and that's easier on the ribbon.
It reflects down, and that's how the pop screens work. The Royer pop screens are actually louvered. They're not. A lot of people are making copies of the pop screen. They call it a pop filter, and that's just perforated metal that they call a pop filter. But the actual pop screen is louvered so that when the sound source hits the pop screen, it ducks down any air away from the ribbon.
Cool. That's how that pop screen of ours works, doesn't it? I know when
yes, it is.
Put that up, and I've blown through it and watched or even blown some smoke, and it kind of goes.
Yep, that's why it's called a pop screen, not a pop filter.
All right. I hear the R series microphones are brighter on the backside. It's true, but have been told to never use it on a guitar amp that way. Why is that?
True. Well, one of the things that made Royer microphones popular at the very beginning of the company was we created what was called an offset ribbon, which placed the ribbon element close, not in the middle of the magnetic gap, but proud of that towards the front. Now on a transducer, there are dampening screens on the front and the back. When you turn the mic around to the backside, there's actually a channeling effect because the ribbon is sitting proud, and that channel causes the microphone to sound a little bit brighter when you're within 1 meter or closer to the microphone. However, having that screen and ribbon so close to the front means if you turn the mic around to the back, you hit it with a hard signal and you could actually drive the ribbon right into the screen, which would destroy the ribbon. However, for acoustic instruments, that works really well for enhancing. It's almost like built-in EQ. You get a little bit of top end, a little bit of extra shimmer with the ribbon microphone. But you wouldn't want to use that on amplified instruments, drums, or anything like that. Just on quieter instruments, violins, etc. Yeah,
we hear that all the time. My job at Royer is really working with a lot of the artists, and I end up in studios and test sessions and recordings, and I see all the time and in my own studio and at Rick's too, acoustic instruments backside pretty much all the time, because that extra little bit of brightness is sweet. But if you stomp the backside, like Rick said, that ribbon's in a place where it could hit the damping screen.
One other thing I would like to mention, because I think people aren't really keen on this, the back side of the microphone is out of phase with the front. So if you want to bring the signal source into correct phase, you would invert the phase at the preamp or on your DAW.
Oh yeah.
And yes. However, there are certain instances where you might want, on an acoustic instrument like an acoustic guitar, when you put the microphone out of phase, some of the bottom end will disappear. So if you have a slightly boomy acoustic guitar like a Dreadnought, you might find that having it out of phase actually sounds better.
Ah, Okay, so another one of those mistakes, technical mistakes that actually could work in recording.
Correct. Yeah.
Nice. I have a story about that. You talked about because it's closer to the rear of the mic, it's close to that screen. If it hits the screen, you can damage it. We loaned a microphone to an engineer, good engineer friends of ours, long time ago, who was recording Robert Cray, and they used it on Robert's guitar amps, but also used it on his vocals.
I remember that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess they used it backward on the amp and also some on the vocals. And we've got examples of that in the Royer audio video library. You can listen to that. The guitar sounded great, vocal sounded great. It's really nice. But we got the microphone back, and the ribbon element had hit the back screen so many times that it blew all these holes through it.
Yeah.
There are all these little holes. It was like somebody took a pin and just and Rick, I have that transducer.
You did. You should put a picture of it posted on Instagram or something. Show people.
I will. I'll do that. I have to dig it up, but I have it. I just couldn't bear the thought of pulling that ribbon out. It was Robert Cray, who's awesome, great blues singer and guitarist, and then there's this ribbon element that just got sacked.
Well, you've got Robert Cray's vibe in that microphone element.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And the evidence is there in all those holes. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll get some shots of that. I hadn't thought of that. We should post that.
Cool.
All right. Let's see what else we have. Oh, here's another one about the Mark II. Can Royer modify my 122, my existing 122, to R122 Mark II specifications?
Ooh, the short answer to that question is no, you cannot, because the Mark II has a different body with the cutouts for the switches and a different circuit board. So they are not, you cannot modify or upgrade a R122 to a Mark II. Sorry.
I mean, you can use high pass and get that high pass effect of the switch on the mic, but the Mark II's pad is sure nice. Nice to just knock it down 15 dB.
Yeah. No, you can't modify them. Sorry.
So the 122, I know the old model sometimes would break up on loud stuff. And I know that there was an impedance issue there too. Is that?
I don't know if there was an impedance issue, but the fact that you couldn't pad down the electronics, you would sometimes overload mostly the preamplifier.
Yeah, the following pre.
Yeah, and that was why. And we found that people were using 122s for guitar amps, which were really better suited with 121s, but they liked the clarity of the 122. So putting a pad on that microphone was just a no-brainer.
Yeah. What's up with the clarity of that? Is it it's a little different than the 121 and
the primary difference between those two microphones is that the 121 uses an IE core transformer, which has a gentle rise in the low frequencies around 50 hertz. And the R122 uses a toroid transformer, which is flat as a pancake. So you don't get that extra bump at the bottom that you get on a 121. And depending on the sound source, that can sound muddy. So the 122 is just the toroid transformer has faster transient response. It's flatter. It doesn't have any of the irregularities of an IE core transformer. But that IE core transformer is also what makes a 121 magical.
Yeah, it really is. And some people want the extra sort of transient response and whatever that hit is a 122 gives you. Like Arturo Sandoval always uses a 122 for his trumpet.
Yeah.
And even the band Muse is always using 122s for their electric guitars. And what they told me is they can hit it really hard if they're in a high input impedance pre. If they dial the impedance down, it tends to drag the mic's electronics a little and they get some distortion. But they go out live with high input impedance pre's and live in the studio. It's just a little bit of a brighter sound. I personally, I like them both, but the 121's more that sort of magic, just
Yeah, there's another thing to consider, John, is a lot of interfaces and low-end preamps have inadequate phantom power. The
Oh,
122 does draw a considerable amount of current, and some of the interfaces just don't have the sauce, especially ones that can operate on batteries, little portable Zoom devices. So when you
yeah.
put Phantom on, if the Phantom drags below a certain point, you can overload the microphone's electronics because they don't have the voltage for the headroom. So it's
Got it.
another factor.
I remember that when going to a friend of our studio in our earlier days, and you were talking about that, and we tested the phantom power at the console, and it was nice and hot
Yep.
back in the vocal booth. Do you remember what it was?
You know what? I do remember what it was. They never maintained their patch bay. So the contacts had oxidized on the patch bay. We would measure 48 volts out of the console, and we would measure about 18 volts going to the microphone through the patch bay. So
Wow.
18 volts just was not enough voltage and current to adequately power the microphone.
And that won't be enough for a lot of other mics too. So that could be some people's issue, just like you said,
For
not
for
maintaining the patch
any
bay.
phantom powered mic, John, one of the things that I've gone to a lot of studios, and in fact in my own studio, I always am cleaning the patch bays, and I find that after a couple of months, the voltage is affected. So I think a lot of studios don't maintain their patch bays as well as or as often as they should.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that now because I'm right in the middle of putting some new stuff into my place, and I'm gonna remember to clean those patch bays out.
Keep them clean.
Yeah. Okay. Because I remember I didn't know it was what it was at that point, but I know you measured like some unbelievable difference between what was coming out of the console and what was showing up at the microphone, and that shouldn't have been. So now we know why.
Yeah, actually, recently we had there was a session at my studio, and the engineer said one of the returns on the EMT reverb plate was down. It was down about 6 dB, and we found out that it was one of the balance lines coming through the patch bay, that one of the contacts was just not making it real good, so it was bringing down the output. So instead of recalibrating the EMT to bring the level up, we just cleaned the patch bay and boom, came back to normal.
Nice. Okay. It's good stuff to keep in mind, keeping all your gear in good shape at those contact points where you can get corrosion and things.
Yep.
All right. Let's find something else here.
Next question, please.
Will phantom power blow up my mic? There's a good question. We hear that all the time.
Okay, it's not a myth. It depends on the microphone. If you have a vintage microphone, such as an old genuine RCA 44, they did a technique of keeping the mic quiet by grounding the transformer. And if you put phantom power on that mic, you will destroy it.
You mean
with phantom
grounding?
Or yeah, with the wiring that is original to the old mic. I think some of the mics have been modified nowadays. They're less prone to that. But on a Royer microphone, the presence or absence of phantom power will have no effect on the microphone. However, if the cable that you're using is miswired, if the connector is worn out, or if you're going through a patch bay that has microphone tie lines where you have the mic panel in the studio and the lines go up to a patch bay. They're called microphone tie lines, and they normal to the console's pre-input or the preamplifier's input. If you cross patch with one channel with phantom on and one channel with phantom off, you will create an instantaneous short circuit as you plug the patch cable in, and that can damage the microphone.
Got it. I've seen some phantom hit mics where we had an open and you can just watch that ribbon go boom, boom, boom. It's like take a bump.
And just a note, some preamplifiers like the Day Kings, you can't turn phantom off. So if those are normal through a patch bay, Phantom is always going to be on those preamps. So that's a little warning.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I remember watching the thing bump. So I thought it would blow it like a fuse, and it didn't do that, but it made it jump. And you would think that that would just stretch out the ribbon corrugations pretty quickly.
Well, in time it will. What it does is it relax the corrugations on the ribbon are actually those little points of, it looks like a sine wave, and at the peaks and dips, those are actually work hardened. The aluminum is work hardened there, so that gives the ribbon its elasticity. But if you keep shocking it and stretching it and pulsing it, after the ribbon's going to relax, and if you keep doing it, ribbon will sag, and then you'll end up with noise, and you need to re-ribbon the microphone.
Yeah, I remember again in the earlier days having some clients bringing 121s in, every 6 months or so, and going, wait, why do I have to ribbon this? But it turns out they're in and out of patch bays constantly, so they were constantly bumping that ribbon and stretching it out. It's kind of like going on the thing over time.
Exactly.
Eventually, it's gonna die.
Yeah, they cry uncle after a while.
Yeah, right. Cool. So we have a question that came in online here. It's I have a bad cat 22R, 11 LLR 2R. Okay. It has matchless capacitors. Is it officially a matchless Lightning 15?
Okay. Short story. I know this isn't Royer business, but when I sold matchless, it was sort of a contentious divorce. And a guy named James Heydrich approached me. We had already started Royer, and he said, I really love matchless. I know that they're not in business right now, or they're going through some problems, and I would love to recreate that amplifier. And I said, well, I am so ticked off at those guys right now that here is the bill of materials. Here is where all the parts are made. These are all the schematics. You go at it and have fun. And so those original Bad Cat amplifiers are actually matchless designs with matchless components. So it's essentially a matchless.
And James was doing really good work, wasn't he? I mean, I remember
he was, in fact, I have all the original prototypes of most of the first Bad Cat amplifiers that James gave me. And he wanted basically my blessing that he was doing a good job at wiring and all of that stuff. So I have all those original amplifiers, and yes, those are 100% bona fide matchlesses.
Whew. Nice. Okay, now I want
I'm probably going to get a bad phone call from somebody from Matchless.
Maybe.
But that was years ago, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I never did get a Bad Cat. I should have. I got a Matchless though. I like it very much.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Rick, a half hour just went by really fast.
Boy.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to do this again today at 1:00 Pacific time.
Please join us.
And I think we've probably got 25. Yeah, we've got so many more questions. So
also, if they go to the website and type in Ask an Engineer, I'll bring those to the party at 1:00.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, goodbye, John.
Take care, Rick.
Nice
See you at
chatting with you. How's
too,
Nashville?
Buddy.
See ya.
Nashville's awesome. Just so you, everybody, Rick and I started Royer with Dave Royer and our other business partner in LA, and I moved out to Nashville about 7 years ago, and
yeah,
love it out here. So this is Royer East. I'm talking to you from Royer East.
Okay, and I'm talking from Royer West. Anyway, see you guys.
Ciao. See you in a bit, Rick.
Bye-bye.